Joining us now, Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Joyce, what a joy to have you at the table.
It's so nice to be with you, especially tonight.
Especially tonight when I have so many questions for you. Is the biggest surprise to you that the Trump team willingly handed over the documents, or is the biggest surprise that some of this has been digitized?
You know, it's still surprising that we're being surprised at this point.
Fair.
There's been a subpoena. There's been a search warrant. Classified material impacts national security. You would expect that it would have all been returned at this point. So I think it's shocking, right, that there's still documentation lurking around out there. The reason one suspects that it was turned over is that Trump is now represented by Jim Trusty, a former DOJ lawyer, someone who is able to search for this sort of material because he possesses a clearance. That's been reported publicly. And so he would have known when he stumbled across this or however it came to his attention that it needed to be immediately returned to the agency. But ultimately, the real jaw dropper here is that this is the first time, as you said, that we've seen indication that classified material was copied, was put onto an electronic media where it could be compromised. Either deliberately someone could have shared it or perhaps a computer could have been hacked. And so this is, I think, really a dramatic news development from the national security point of view.
I want to talk about the national security point of view, but first I want to talk about this legally. What did it change legally?
I don't think it changes anything. It's additional evidence that doesn't work in the former president's favor, because after all, this was recovered at Mar-a-Lago. When DOJ executed their search warrant, it would have been very specific about the areas that they had probable cause to search. So now there are more questions. Where were these items recovered from? Were they removed from the areas where DOJ searched? Were they intermingled with the former president's personal items? A lot more questions. All of the answers bad for Trump.
But if they're putting one document on a laptop, on a thumb drive, does that also raise the question that there are other documents that have been put on a thumb drive on a laptop?
So it does. You have to worry about that if you're the FBI, if you're the intelligence community. What else is out there? We've seen with Trump in this case that what we know, the documents that are recovered tend to be the tip of the iceberg. There is always more. And the problem is that this is not a situation like with President Biden or former Vice President Pence, where there's then a consent search conducted by the FBI. Here it's just Trump's lawyers turning things over piecemeal.
You talked about national security. What does it say to you? What's your biggest fear?
So classified documents all have the ability to damage national security if they fall into the wrong hands. And part of what we don't know yet in this new reporting is what kind of documents were digitized. But top secret information tends to be the sort of thing that if it's released, it could do grave damage to the national security. So depending on what was involved here, and of course the FBI now has the computers and the thumb drives, one of the things that they'll look for in their forensic investigation is whether these items were shared further, whether there was any sort of hacking that compromised them. There is a lot of potential damage here.
So that's the Trump news. Let's talk about the Pence news. Do you think he complies?
Interesting question. Sometimes as a prosecutor, you send someone what we call a friendly subpoena. They tell you, I'd like
Does
to
that like have like a heart and an XO on it? No, it's in the language.
Might just as well, right? I mean, essentially you're saying, we're going to give you a little bit of cover if you'll come in and testify. There are reasons to believe that Mike Pence might want a subpoena before he testified. He's trying to walk this narrow political tightrope. There's also, though, some other indication that Pence intends to fight at least some portion of testimony. And when you think about it, this is someone who did not testify to the January 6th subcommittee. He led them on a little bit of a dance until at the very end he finally said, no, I'm not going to testify. You know, as a public servant, as a vice president, you would think he might want the American people to know the truth. Hillary Clinton did that for 11 sort of brutal hours in the Benghazi hearings. We didn't see anything like that from Mike Pence. It's a little bit interesting to see how he handles this.
I mean, the fact that he has called Trump's actions reckless but not criminal, I wonder if you think that is a line that he would reiterate should he choose to testify to a grand jury.
That's why prosecutors are entitled to get his testimony under oath. And when Pence made those comments, and it was last December when he said Trump was reckless, not criminal, That's the sort of political conclusion you might draw. But, it's not up to Mike Pence to decide whether the former president's actions were criminal. He's a fact witness. It's as though he had observed a bank robbery, and prosecutors want to put him in the grand jury to say, what did you see? Who was involved? What happened? Here, where Pence was, it seems very likely that there was an effort to recruit him for a conspiracy to interfere with the government. Prosecutors are entitled to get all of the details, and then prosecutors and a jury can draw the conclusion about whether anything criminal happened.
I don't think you have to be clairvoyant to know that Trump's team will likely claim executive privilege in some type of effort to block this. I wonder if you think we hear that from them, and if you also think we hear it from Pence's team.
So because this happens in the context of a grand jury proceeding, any sort of a challenge like that will likely proceed in the form of a sealed sort of a court proceeding. First to Beryl Howell, the judge who oversees the grand jury in the District of Columbia, and then perhaps to the circuit court. I know some folks have suggested that they think there will be a lot of delay, that Trump will play his usual delay game. I think maybe it won't be as long as some people are concerned it might be, because many of Pence's aides have already testified. Their testimony would have implicated similar executive privilege type issues. And it's likely to me that some of the grand jury, the sealed reporting that we've seen, that some of that consideration involves these same issues. And the courts may dispense with it quickly, and Pence may be in front of the grand jury sooner rather than later.
Quickly, let me ask you, you have the FBI finding an additional classified document in Pence's possession during this consensual search. Where do you think this leaves Garland? Like, do you think DOJ ends up with 3 special counsels?
Well, the special counsel regulations say that you should appoint a special counsel if there's something criminal to investigate. So far, no evidence of criminality with Mike Pence. Of course, that's also true for President Biden. The counsel there was clearly appointed out of political appearances. But you don't have to continue to make the same mistake. There's no need to appoint a special counsel for Mike Pence.
Joyce Smith, I'm always happy to see you, but to have you in person on a night like this, what a treat. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.